following program was produced by a community producer. The content, views, and opinions expressed are the sole responsibility of the community producer and do not reflect Malden Access Television, the City of Malden, or your cable provider. MATV welcomes your comments. Call us at 781-321-6400 or email us at access@matv.org.
Hello, my name is Osa Schwab of MATV's Neighborhood View. I'm here today as host of Inside Malden, Ideas and Stories That Inspire. I'm here today with Mai Du. Known in Malden as Sifu Mai Du, founder of the Wah Lum Kung Fu and Tai Chi Academy. Also voted Malden's favorite martial arts academy for 8 years, and it was recent grand champion of the 2015 U.S. International Koshu Federation Championship Tournament in Baltimore. After earning a master's in education, Mai served in high-profile roles for the American Red Cross and YWCA. She developed, implemented, and directed a national award-winning youth leadership in service program, among other things. She was one of 12 voting delegates at the YWCA World Delegate Council meeting in Nairobi, Kenya. As recipient of many awards for community service and impact, she is relentless in the work of instilling hope and inspiration in our younger generations. Mai embodies strength and tenderness. She shows us the wisdom that flows from a clear sense of identity and purpose, and the power that comes by deliberate practice of physical, mental, and spiritual discipline. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to Malden, your story, for I know you come from Vietnam.
Yes.
Yes.
And firstly, thank you so much for that intro, and that was a mouthful. And just want to say that even though you mentioned accomplishments, but that also comes with a lot of learning, lessons learned, and falling down along the way and standing right back up. So I just don't want to come across as if like it was easy and it's just all glory and good, but it's just a part of the journey that I do with my heart. And thank you for learning all about me.
You're welcome. And we will surely learn of some of the challenges you faced and what brought you through to the other side.
Yes, yes. Yes, I come from Vietnam. My family is Chinese ethnic, so we're Chinese Vietnamese from Vietnam. And it was after the Vietnam War, my grandmother, aunts and uncles and cousins escaped Vietnam in the late 70s, early 80s. They were in refugee camps, and they walked through Cambodia to Thailand, and they stayed at a refugee camp in Thailand and the Philippines for many years, and then they were sponsored by a gay couple in Chelsea, Massachusetts.
No kidding.
And a couple of years later, the U.S. had the family reunification program, and we were also trying to leave the country post-Vietnam War, and that's how my family immediate family was able to come to Chelsea, Massachusetts first. And we did stay in Thailand and the Philippine camps, refugee camps for less than a year. And then we arrived in Logan Airport on Halloween night.
What an experience that must have been.
I always share the story of how my American dream started out with the nightmare first at Logan Airport, seeing the vampires and the goblins and all that happens during Halloween night, and that was quite a surprise, and it took a while for me to understand what it was. It was Halloween.
Right. And I understand it wasn't, you had some initial challenges right off the bat living in Chelsea.
Yes. I believe about 2 months after we arrived, and we were cramped, three immediate families share a small apartment just so that we can try to resettle and figure out what life will be for the different families. And as we were moving out from that initial apartment, my mom and my older sister got robbed by knife point. And it happened to be their neighbors, the teenagers upstairs from the apartment, and they knew we were moving, and it was unfortunate, but we were okay, so that was a blessing.
That was quite an unexpected trauma to have to deal with in the new wonderful country of America, right? So you describe yourself having come to a clear sense of identity that you are Vietnamese, Chinese, and American. And tell me a little bit about that and how you came to that clarity of a sense of identity.
I moved to Malden at the beginning of freshman year in high school. And prior to that, I identified myself as just Chinese and sometimes would fluctuate to Vietnamese depending on the context and if I was speaking Chinese or Vietnamese at home or to whoever. I remember Miss Katie Kwong, who's still a teacher at Malden High, invited me to an Asian American gathering of young people to just share about Asian American experiences. And at that moment, the concept of Asian American was introduced to me because prior to that, I just thought I was Chinese or Vietnamese. And I believe by then, no, actually, I don't think I became a US citizen yet. But I just thought, oh, it's Chinese or Vietnamese. And when I went to this meeting, there were Japanese and Indian and Thai and Korean youth. And for the very first time, I realized the diversity within the Asian American community or the Asian community for that matter. And it made me think a lot about how I see myself and how others would see me. And it took me a while to start introducing the identity of being American. I think legally it was the U.S. citizenship certificate. But I think that when I start feeling ownership of being a resident in the U.S., feeling that actually I belong here and I should do something to be a part of it meaningfully. And that's when I embraced my Americanness. But then I did not want to overlook my Asianness and as well as, or just specifically Chinese or Vietnamese. So I think when the time came that my life in America was longer than my life in Vietnam, then I felt like, you know what, I'm definitely American. But it's, on a given day, if you ask me, I either may say Chinese, Vietnamese American, Vietnamese Chinese American, or Asian American. And within context, it may just be Asian.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. I want to touch for just a minute about what it was like to be ethnic Chinese in Vietnam, and what are the nuances of that kind of combination?
So, because there were differences, it motivated me to take this course at Tufts University, where I went for my undergrad and master's. But there was a course called Chinese Diaspora, and it was a study of Chinese overseas in different parts of the world, particularly other countries around the South China Sea. And I learned a lot about the similarities and experiences of Chinese overseas. But when I was in Vietnam, and then later on as I reflect back and also learn about the experiences of the Chinese in Vietnam when I was living in the US, I realized that there were lots of differences. Firstly, a lot of the Chinese migrants settled along the coastlines. And it was just easier because they were looking for work or they may be doing businesses, they were merchants. So they settled there and they tend to be either small business owners or that they work, but they're not farmers, they're toward the coast.
Right.
Some of them are coolies, they're labor workers and etc. And they settle and they take roots and like my family, my grandparents and etc. We became a part of the country, but we kept our culture and our language.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes I look back and for the case of the Chinese, it was so important for us to keep our roots that we hold on to and practice it and preserve it, sometimes even more than some of the native Chinese that are living in China right now, because it meant so much to us to know who we are and where we come from. But So we definitely still had, for the Chinese community in Vietnam, we had the language, the culture, the practice, but there were also discriminations against the ethnically different communities and groups. And I learned later on that some Chinese were not allowed to go to college, or depending on the policy and the regime and what's going on in the world, but definitely it was not equal.
So speaking of practicing cultural traditions and so forth, I understand that you very early on developed a love for Kung Fu, and that was born of your family members and so forth.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So when I was very young, and probably 6, 7, I left Vietnam around 8, so 6, 7, and my parents were practicing Tai Chi. And they would go to the outdoors. Either it would be a lot or a park or outside a temple or a church, and it's for health reason. And my brothers were practicing Aikido and Judo, and my sister was doing Tai Chi as well. And I said, I want to do something, and I just love it. I had no idea what it was like, but I just knew this concept of using your body, moving and expressing yourself and being strong and self-defense and etc. So I wanted to learn, and they kept saying, no, you're too young, you're a girl, whatever it may be. They kept denying me the opportunity. Even when I came to America, I still had this love, and especially being able to be exposed to the movies, the Hong Kong movies, the Chinese movies, and actually when I got to the U.S., that was the first time I got to see a bigger screen, because in Vietnam, we had this very small black and white screen that only played from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and sometimes, and it's mostly Russian communist kind of stories, and because it was Vietnam,
of course.
But here, I started seeing all these movies, and I got really intrigued and really inspired to learn. So I kept begging, and finally my parents said, go ask each other. And I said, okay, that means a yes. So.
And you mentioned something about these movies that you watched. You really enjoyed the sense of value and social responsibility. There was something
I mean, it's always kind of, the hero and
and
the heroine and whatnot. And it just feels like it's a sense of empowerment that you have a certain level of skills and exposure to resource that you can do something to do good for others, and it just touched me somehow. It's just being able to use both your body and your mind and your connections and whatever. Maybe I can't even remember the stories, but it was just something that I felt so close to, that I wanted to do and to embrace, and so.
So tell me a little bit about how your practice of Kung Fu and Tai Chi has influenced and affected the decisions you make, your day-to-day life. I mean, are there certain aspects of that practice that really play a role in your life?
I think when I started, it was just a love for doing martial arts.
Sure.
And the blessings I received. I started in Chinatown, Boston Chinatown, and it was a very diverse school. It was the first time I interacted more closely with white people and black people and people of all backgrounds, because prior to that, I was, and I started, I believe, was in the 5th grade. So prior to that, we were just, the language level, the skills was not really there. I went to school, came home, and just kind of kept to myself. And the most exposure to kind of the outside the Asian community was really from watching cartoon or the media, and classrooms interaction. And even that, I stayed back a whole year in 3rd grade because there was no English as a second language program. There was no English immersion. There was nothing, and I was basically presented with a phonics book and a math workbook, and that was the whole year that I was self-taught. So I stayed back the entire year because there was no resource. So it was my first time going to the Kung Fu school to be exposed to very diverse people. So from there, it meant so much to open up a whole new world, like what America meant. Was this a place of, back then the concept of the melting pot, and of course later on it became the salad bowl and everything else. But it was just my first time being exposed to just people who were different from me. But then we shared this common thread and passion of wanting to learn Kung Fu and practice Kung Fu. So it meant a lot. So that aspect of the social aspect of it. And then there's also the discipline, which is working hard, being in tune with your own body, learning about your abilities and inabilities, the discipline of the mind, the body, the spirit. And so that's the Kung Fu practice. Later on, I got exposed to Tai Chi, which is slower movement. It's known as meditation in motion. So it taught me to be more introspective, to be to really appreciate the softness of things, the flow, how to be grounded, but at the same time being able to influence your surrounding and yourself. And it just a lot of appreciation for the traditions, the art, but also to appreciate how that is a way of cultivating the self and the mind, the body, and the spirit. So I think how I practice that is not just with the body now, but it's also what I do, and always trying to keep things in balance.
Balance, that's a wonderful concept. So in terms of the teaching that you do, so you had this individual practice and you excelled at that, and now you have a school, which was not always a full-time endeavor. What is it like? How is it different to teach and impart these skills to students from 6 to 150, right? Versus your own individual practice? I mean, how is that, or how is teaching an extension of that practice?
Well, I guess I kind of have to answer that question with giving the context of what the school is for me. So the school, I have always viewed it as my platform for community building. I mean, like I said, it's I come from nonprofit community work background, even very hardcore community organizing, youth activism. Been to DC doing rallies on immigrant rights, speaking out at Boston City Hall, and speaking in front of thousands of people about youth empowerment and youth leadership. So a lot of that community work and community mindset and organizing and kind of solidarity building mindset, I had wanted to create an environment and a safe space for the diverse community in my hometown, Malden, to come together and to grow together. So when I opened the school, which was actually almost an accident as well, it was a place for me to build a bigger family and a bigger community. So when I was still working at the Red Cross then when the school started. So it was a hobby. I actually at one point considered to make it a nonprofit.
Oh, really?
But I then examined the structure of what a nonprofit is like, and I said, you know what? There are two different things. One is that I don't want to be begging for money all the time in order to keep the school going, and then also to be accountable to a board of directors that may not understand the tradition of what a Chinese Kung Fu school is like. So I felt that, if I have integrity to the values that I'm going to try to instill to the students or to influence the culture of the school, then I will hold myself accountable. And so it became a for-profit school. It's a lot easier to operate in that sense.
Absolutely.
And more control in terms of what can happen and et cetera, as long as the integrity is there. So like I say, I hold myself accountable to that.
Yes.
But from there, the teaching becomes not just Kung Fu teaching. I think it's lifelong teaching and learning, growing together, sharing, and learning to appreciate each other, no matter what age, what background, what level of talent or anything. It's really a gathering place, a safe space for many who has an appreciation for. It could be self-defense. It could be just fitness and health. It could be mind, body, spirit, de-stressing, or it could just be a place where, by association, somebody who's there, and you feel like, hey, it's a positive space, so let's just be a part of it.
So it almost sounds like your nonprofit work, activism, was sort of the path that has led you to creating this platform that you talk about?
Yes, I think philosophically, yes. But the actual work of teaching, I think, is still very traditional in the sense that it has to be just discipline and hard work.
Yes.
And we do teach a lot of that and a lot of values in philosophy. We teach about respect, self-control, teamwork, kindness. And also, like I said, I mean, I was so blessed to have been empowered as a young girl, and then a young, Asian American, and then a young woman, and a younger woman of color. I mean, there's like many layers, however you want to look at it, at what given moment, context, or whoever I'm talking to. It's that process. The process is always about that process of learning and then teaching, and then. So I always tell my students, especially the ones who are ready, you learn, and then you teach, and then you teach, and then you learn. So it's learning to teach and teaching to learn. It's always going to be a cycle.
It's like a cycle.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Your drive, your passion for youth is clear. It's the thread that seems to run through everything you do, even if it's not straight youth development or youth leadership programs. But it's why are you so passionate about youth? Where does that come from?
When I decided to really dedicate myself to education, and actually the term education, I mean, to educate is really to share, to share knowledge and skill. And when I had to pick a major, and when I knew that, you know what, I'm not carved out for pre-med. I'm not going to be that Asian that had to go to do either a doctor or a lawyer or whatnot. And when I realized, I sat in that Chem 2 class and I said, you know what am I here? Because I was doing so much community work at that moment. At the time, I was living and breathing community. And I was sitting at my Chem class and I said, no, this is not me. So I re-examined what I like doing, what I enjoy, what drives me, and what what sparks my interest, and etc. And I said, education is agent for change. It is the agent for change. It is the most powerful agent, and if it's done well, because you can teach bad things and you can teach good things.
Yes.
So it's just a tool, right? So it's how you use the tool, and so when I decided that it's education that is the most powerful thing to create positive change in community and society, in the world, I knew that was the path. And because I was involved in youth organizing, I knew how powerful and how effective it was. Just seeing myself growing up with youth empowerment, leadership development, but also have been there to witness, my peers who've gone through that. And I knew that was young people is where the investment should be, investment of time, money, passion, everything, because it is the next generation. And when I say the next generation, I have to also remind me, and still I do, that it's not just the next generation, it's the now generation.
Yes.
And the now generation can just be a 3-year-old, or it can be an 18 or 25-year-old. So it's not just like keep saying, no, it's the future, they're coming, no, they're here. They're here and they're now, and they have a lot to offer. They're young people are creative, they're enthusiastic, they have lots of energy, and when you give them a sense of purpose and they believe in themselves and they know that there's somebody there who trusts them and will support them and will guide them and will mentor them, they are willing to do it. So, some of the stereotypes of what young people are or can be and et cetera, the negative stereotypes, I think those are just either a certain perception or manifestation of lack of something that should be there for the young people. So if we guide them well, we cultivate them and foster them in very thoughtful and very supported and meaningful, effective ways, they create change now, not tomorrow.
Yes, they do.
And with that, I always feel that, you know, these are the people, these are the individuals, these are the spirits, the souls that I would like to be a part of, and I feel very blessed when we cross paths.
Yes. You talk also about that you really respect young people. And what does that mean when you say you respect them? Perhaps it means what you just said, that you have vision for them. And
I think, I mean, not just young people, respect in general.
Right.
I think any individual when I meet, and I'm not sure if I'm articulating this right at this very moment, but I try to understand the person for who they are. And then I try also to not go into the human tendency of making assumptions and stereotype as well. So I mean, there's a lot of internal things that I can, like checklist, you know, things like that. But I try to find out, you know, what the person's background is, their history. And it could be a 3-year-old with a certain, you know, family condition, or it could be a 60-year-old person, but just where they come from.
So it's kind of like a curiosity.
Yeah, a curiosity and a heart connection.
And a heart connection, yeah.
And then so it's kind of where they come from, their history, and then learn about the here, the now, the presence.
Right.
You know, who they are now, what drives them, what are they interested in, just to know them, their being, and then. For me, maybe because I'm an optimistic person, and also I tend to easily have visions of just like what can be, you know, because the whole 4 things. I try to see, you know, what is the future of that path.
Right.
You know, tomorrow or 10 years from now, or it could be next week, and how, you know, the fullest potential of this being in front of me. And then so I feel like the respect is being able to kind of give space to those 3 components of someone's being, is their history, their past, their present, and their future.
That's really interesting. I also shared a little bit with my son, who's 13, he's a teen, and I asked him, you know, what do you think youth need to be empowered? And to feel respected. And he mentioned something that I thought was interesting. He said that they have to be fully engaged and emotionally present. So it might be a little intense, but they're really there, and they're not just like, oh, whatever, you can do whatever, you know.
Yeah, so we did mention a little bit, and there's that personal buy-in of their being that we talked about earlier.
Yes, I love that, personal buy-in of their being. The other thing he mentioned as feeling a need for is that you, in the teachers around him, that you have this appropriate balance, getting back to the balance, of humor, realism, and encouragement. And
the realism is just really important.
Yes.
When you're real, you're fully there.
Yes, that's right.
But it's also I definitely feel as a need now. I mean, I think interacting with so many people, so many young people on a weekly basis, the need to really not sugarcoat.
Yes.
And I feel that it happens a lot these days, and either sugarcoat or protecting young people from failing. Because a part of anything is, a part of learning is you gotta fail to learn why something didn't work.
Right.
And then stand up and then examine it, evaluate it, and then try again. And then, hey, it works a little better this time. Evaluate it again and see how can I get it to be even better, and having high expectations, higher standards for self and others. And I think that process of failing is a part of the evaluation and a part of the learning. So I feel that for young people, you gotta tell them that it's okay to fail, or it's okay that when you think something is gonna go a certain way and it doesn't, that don't give up. It's just a part of the process. That process is so important. So at the Kung Fu school, well, number one, it's very traditional. So there are certain things that they need to learn about respect and structure and discipline and et cetera that comes with martial art training. After all, it's martial art.
Yes.
But the other part is, excuse me, the other part is that, you know, that seriousness and being real with them that if you're going to keep doing that, it's just not going to work and you're not going to get there. And it's just laying it out just simply and clearly. But do it, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so when you say it with encouragement, support, and offer alternatives or offer strategies or tips and ways that they can get better instead of just a put down, but provide perspectives that reflect what it is that may not be working, and then tell them that this is what you need to do. So it's not just telling why it's not good, but saying, hey, it may not be good right now, but this is what you need to get there, and you got to put the work in there. And I think that balance, of humor, being serious, being strict, being there, being intense, but also to lighten it, when necessary, have humor, have the human touch, the heart-to-heart talk, connection. Those are really, really important to young people, particularly young people. They got to experience what it's like to be cared for, what love is. When one person is willing to either share time, resource, money, anything, food, it shows that they're willing to open themselves up and share a little bit about who they are and what they are. And that's really key.
Can you talk a little bit about self-motivation? Because I know that's a big thing. How does one get a young person to be motivated and to take hold of their own life? That's a tricky...
Can I share that actually some adults are still trying to figure that out?
That is the truth.
But I think for young people, when I think about the topic of self-motivation, I think that it helps a lot to know that there's some purpose to doing something. And sometimes you don't have to figure it out, that purpose yourself. Sometimes you can trust somebody else telling you that that's the purpose, that's the reason why you do it. If you trust somebody enough and believe that that's the good reason why you do it, then there's more of a motivation to actually, get up and do something. And so I think that, having sort of like an understanding of a purpose or a mission or why you're there. So could be a sense of belonging or a sense of ownership in something. So then you feel like, hey, I want to do this because I belong here. I own this. Or a certain structure that just doesn't allow you to not do it.
Right.
So that, you go to school, you just have to go to school.
That's right.
And if you don't, there's some consequence to that. So the structure is there. And then I think some sort of accountability. So that, when you know that you do something and if it doesn't go the way that you should, or it should, there's accountability to that. There's some consequence to that. So if it's good, there's some feedback. And if it's not good, either you did your part and something else didn't happen, then something is accountable for something else. But then I also think about back, the years of when I was doing volunteer management at the American Red Cross, and I did have some formal training on volunteer management, and these 4 things stuck with me, and I'm so glad these 4 things have stuck with me. Is that for volunteers, they're at least when I was learning about it, it was these 4 things. When people volunteer, they either do it because there's a larger mission they relate to, they believe in that mission, so they want to be a part of that work. It's that mission. Or it's by association, somebody they know.
Right.
Or it could be an organization or brand that they believe in, and they're like, I want to be associated with that. So I'm motivated to do it. I'm motivated to get up and be a part of that.
Right, that makes sense.
Recognition. The other one was recognition and acknowledgement. Like they do it and they got rewarded. So they got recognized and they got rewarded. So they may get a little award or whatever it is. It motivates them to go again because they get recognition. Or, and then the last was could be power, title, or an opportunity to really create change or impact.
Right.
So that so they're motivated because they're holding a certain position or a certain title or a certain job or a certain formal structure, responsibility that they need to go and fulfill. So I think all these apply to young people.
Absolutely.
I think that, that's why when I talk about youth empowerment, youth leadership, I had talked about this a long time ago, is, we can even have a youth council that can do real work in government, supported by whatever arm in city government that can really support the youth development work, but really give them some power, give them some like real responsibility, give them a small budget to really manage and create projects and things that can influence positively for young people in the city of Malden. All these things, like I say, can apply because they really, I find that they're pretty true, these four factors of motivations.
Right.
But like I say, everything else too. They just you gotta feel belong. So for young people to do something, they gotta feel that they belong there and they wanna be there. There's a part of them that's there.
I really like what you say about you have to have, you talked about infrastructure at one point and some sort of structure to have success. And I'm thinking now of Malden. So Malden is an amazing place in so many ways, so diverse. People from, the other day I saw someone carrying a goat on their shoulders, to the store. And I mean, it's just...
Wow, that's great.
It was I think it was a Muslim holiday. And or no, it was a lamb, sorry. But at any rate, and Malden is a wonderful place to live, but of course, there's a higher place that we could get to. And what do you see as the elements of potential change in Malden that can help us to really, really harness the diversity beyond just having these events that are nice, which are very important, but...
Well, funny you mentioned the live animal. I mean, I got married in Malden and we had live chicken at my wedding because that was just kind of like life and all these things.
Oh,
so yeah, so it's the
That's
culture.
A new one. That's a new one.
It's a culture. But I think that it's one. I mean, Malden. I'm a Maldonian. Malden High graduate. Malden resident, business owner. And I try to do as much as I can when I can to take part in whatever is needed. The diversity is rich, and it's as a location, it's still affordable enough compared to the locations around other cities and towns around here. I mean, although it's getting to be harder and harder for folks to afford as rent increase, but it's still one of the places that people can still, if they share or however they work their finance out, it's still at least a place that we can still have the diversity of residents. I mean, the high school and the diversity of the students is a testament of the richness of Malden human capital.
Yes.
And the languages that you
65 or more that are spoken,
yes.
different languages.
I thought it was over 100 different languages at the high school, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the number
I'll have
is.
To look that up.
But it's really, really diverse,
yes.
and it's rich and it's great. And I think that compared to, I mean, like I said, I've been here since high school, so that's like early 90s. Now it's 16. So it's 25 years, so I've seen the changes over the years, and we definitely have gotten more and more diverse. And I think that we continue to celebrate. We continue to celebrate the diversity,
right.
and there are really good people in Malden who, I mean, projects like Malden Reads and Malden's Promise, and a lot of good initiatives bring communities out, and then there's the Asian festivals or the Chinese Lunar New Year, and there's also the Latino festival and all that. I mean, there have been lots of work to bring people out so that there are opportunities for people to meet and greet and share culture and learn a little bit about you, and you learn a little bit about me, and that's where we can break down barriers and create more comfort levels for people when they see each other who are, either they look different or act different. So all that's been great and good. I think that for Malden to go to the next level, and I think is not, I don't think is a choice anymore. I think we're at a point where we're so diverse that is a need.
Right.
That we need to take the next step. It's not just about celebrating. It's not just about being in each other's presence and kind of like I like you and you like me, and I can tolerate you and you can tolerate me. But I think it comes to a point where we need to embrace it in a way that we are living with each other. You're my neighbor, and I'm your neighbor, and maybe we do things differently. Let's learn about how we can do things differently that 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 we can have deeper conversations.
Right.
Or let's talk about city services, like instead of language. I mean, I had a woman who came and crying to me and said she went to City Hall and she can't speak her language, she can't get help. And I think like services, like real services that have that can address the diversity of the city. It's not just kind of like we have these services for the citizens of Malden, but how can there be access that is culturally relevant? How can we have information sharing that is culturally relevant? Because these means that people are living lives and they need needs. It comes down to needs now. It's no longer a choice. I think it's a need. It's a need of the city to act more proactively.
Yes.
But it's also the needs of the people they need these things. It's not a want, it's a need. And we need to recognize that because we are just getting a lot more diverse than before.
Absolutely.
And we're just tighter.
Yes, yes.
So access has to be there.
Right.
The other thing is that, last year there was an article on the Blue and Gold, the high school's newspaper that talked about the diversity of the staff in the high school. And it was over 90% of white teachers. And it's not reflective of the demographics of the students at the high school. And I think that needs to be addressed because I think we need to look at diversity from an asset-based point of view. Or number one,
I like that.
When students see that their teachers or administrators or the adults in their 1/3 of their lifetime, I mean, they spend a third of their day at school.
Right.
Out of the 180 days. If they see that, the adults reflect themselves, it's a lot more comforting for the students.
Right.
It's role model.
Right.
They have somebody who looks and speak or share cultures and experience like them. They can see that as their role models, and that's important to see role models. The other thing is, having adults reflective of the demographics of students, it makes us all, for the learning community to really appreciate the values and the importance of diversity.
Yes.
So it's a game.
Yes.
It's not something that we have to cater to. It's something that we can learn from and enrich ourselves with. And then, there's this thing called stereotype threat. So there's this internal threat that we may feel when we are not in the company of people who look or act like us. And so students can feel more comfortable. Like the Asian American, the Massachusetts Asian American Educators Association recently had a community discussion with the new superintendent. And one of the students shared about how she had particularly because of Asian American organization, but this Asian student talked about how she had this Asian American math teacher, and she said, you know what, we share the common experience, so therefore she now can just not worry about everything else and just focus on learning.
Right.
Because it's, it's understood.
Right.
So then there's not a lot of kind of like social cultural navigation that has to take place before you actually go to the learning. She goes directly to the learning. And then and just the diversity itself. I mean, we have a lot to offer each other.
Absolutely.
So it's just rich.
And it's such a, I mean, they say biodiversity is, of course, gives the most robust kind of ecosystem when you have diversity of species and so forth. So it's the same for.
So I think we just need to, I want to hold the city now, like as a community. Like let's be even more than just talking about being like friendly. I think that it's great. It's a price we pay too, is that we have the world within our backyard or next door neighbor, but then everybody has their needs, and we need to be sensitive and accountable to all parts of that diversity. And I'm not talking about just one particular group. I just think that we need to really look at it. I know Boston has the Office of New Bostonians. We can have an Office of New Modonians.
I mean, like that.
I mean, things like that can be more proactive, more, that we take initiative. We're not just either reacting, or that we are just kind of doing things that, oh, something came up, so therefore let's try to figure it out. We can be more proactive, particularly young people. I think they can be very resourceful and creative in talking about what can be done.
And I think, just having gotten to know you and researched a little bit about you, the whole proactivity is sort of another one of those themes that runs through your life. I mean, you just, you see a need and you go for it, and you build these coalitions or advocacy groups. And I'm also reminded of a journalist who you may have heard of, but she's quite like-minded to what you're all about. And this is Michelle Martin, and she, in a conversation with Krista Tippett of On Being, she said something amazing. She actually challenged people, and I feel like it's an appropriate way to end this wonderful conversation with the challenge that comes from Michelle Martin through you and I, and I'm on board with that. And that is, here's what she said. She said, "You want to know what my real charge to people is? My real charge to people is look around and see who's missing and try to invite that person." It sort of speaks to what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely look who's not here, and
Yes.
why are they not here?
Exactly.
And if they're here, can they speak for themselves?
Right, right.
And if so, what can we do to help them to have their own voice?
Right.
I mean, there's just so much, that empowerment piece, and that reminds me of a quote that I live by, which is that when one is hungry, you can give them a handful of grain, and that will mean more than you give them a bushel of grain when they're full. So it's that kind of urgency, a sense of urgency and a sense of act now, and to share. Even if you don't have a lot, a handful, maybe you have 3, you can share 1. But it's you got to do it. You got to do it now, because the moment passes and that person is no longer, either that person is beyond hungry and really dying, or that person is no longer there. And even if you want to give it to that person and he or she has just left and gone somewhere else, and then you're left with this feeling like, I could have done something more at that moment, but I didn't do it, and it sits with you. So I think that we all should feel that sense of urgency, that we are all, we're on this journey of being human. And that comes with, in the Chinese, therefore, the cycles of life, which is 生老病死, means birth, age, sickness, and then death. And how we define those, how we live the 4 parts of that cycle really make our life unique. But we all go through it, no matter who we are and what we look like, and whatever, we all go through that. And it is this sense of personal responsibility and the sense of urgency that, you need to connect to one another, and to give meaning to the person next to you, and by doing that, you actually enrich your own lives. And I think that we need to just seize that moment, and not just seize the moment and make the day or whatever it is. It's not just that. It's really making it meaningful.
Right.
Making it meaningful so that in the end, your roadmap has some really good footprints for others to follow.
Well, this has been very rich, and I think it's one of many
Same here.
conversations that we will have together, and perhaps with other members of the community, to figure out how we can pay attention to what needs to happen now. And thank you so much for what you do for the community here in Malden and at large, and for being willing to learn with us and grow, and encourage others to do so as well.
Well, I'm just doing my part like how you're doing yours.
We can do it together.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. My name is Osa Schwab. I'm with Inside Malden, Ideas and Stories that Inspire.